The dust settled over Kelton, Utah like a fine golden blanket as the stagecoach rolled into town. The year 1878 emblazoned in the weariness of its wooden frame, just as clearly as it was etched into the lines of every face that turned to watch its arrival. Among the passengers stepping down was Josephine Turner, clutching a worn carpetbag to her chest, her eyes darting nervously across the unfamiliar landscape of what would become her new beginning, or perhaps her final desperation. Josie to the family, she'd buried back east smoothed down her tattered dress, a once fine garment that had seen better days long before the arduous journey west. The fabric hung loosely on her thin frame, patched in several places with mismatched cloth that spoke of careful poverty. Her chestnut hair, normally her pride, had gone lank and greasy during the days of travel with no proper bathing facilities, and she'd given up trying to pin it properly beneath her faded bonnet. The Wells Fargo agent barely glanced at her as he handed down her single trunk. "Name?" he asked gruffly, checking his manifest. "Turner. Josephine Turner." Her voice was quiet but clear, a remnant of the finishing school education she'd received in happier times. She noted how his eyes flicked briefly to her dirty dress before dismissing her as unimportant. The familiar sting of judgment was one she'd grown accustomed to over the past year. "Room at the boarding house is paid through the week," he said, pointing down the dusty street. "Mrs. Hollister's place, the blue one with the white trim. You'll be expected at the Mercantile tomorrow morning at 7 sharp." Josie nodded her thanks, gathering her belongings. The weight of her trunk was considerable, but she wouldn't leave it unattended. Everything she owned in the world was packed inside, including the last remnants of the life she'd fled. "Need some help with that, miss?" The voice was deep and warm like sunlight on river stones. Josie turned to find herself looking up at a tall man with broad shoulders and kind eyes the color of a summer storm. He wore the practical clothes of a cattleman's sturdy pants tucked into well-worn boots, a simple shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows revealing tanned, muscular forearms. His dark hair curled slightly beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and a neatly trimmed beard framed a smile that reached all the way to those remarkable gray eyes. She began, instinctively wanting to refuse. Pride had been her companion for too long, but practicality won out. "Yes, thank you, sir." "I would appreciate that greatly." "No, sir, necessary, madam. Name's Vincent Quincy. Most folks call me Vince." He lifted her trunk with an ease that made her feel both relieved and oddly self-conscious about the weight she'd been struggling with. "Just arrived in Kelton." "Yes." "I'm to start at the Mercantile tomorrow." She fell into step beside him, noting how he adjusted his long stride to accommodate her shorter one. "Hargrove's place. Good man to work for, fair at least." Vincent Quincy studied her from the corner of his eye. "Traveled far." "From Boston," she admitted. "After my parents died, there wasn't much left for me there." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Lot of folks come west for fresh starts. You got family here?" "No, just myself." Josie stopped in front of the blue clapboard house that matched the agent's description. "This is it, I believe. Mrs. Hollister runs a respectable place. You'll be comfortable here." He set her trunk down on the porch with care. "Welcome to Kelton, Miss Turner." "Thank you, Mr. Quincy." She offered a small smile, the first genuine one in what felt like months. He tipped his hat politely. "If you need anything while you're settling in, I'm usually around. My ranch is just outside town, the Broken Q." With that, he turned and walked away, his confident gait that of a man completely at ease in his world. Josie watched him go before turning to knock on the boarding house door. Within moments, she was face to face with a plump, middle-aged woman whose stern expression softened slightly at the sight of the travel-weary young woman. "You must be the Turner girl," Mrs. Hollister said, opening the door wider. "Come in, come in. You look dead on your feet, poor thing." The house was clean and modestly furnished, with a parlor to the right and what appeared to be a dining room to the left. The scent of baking bread permeated the air, making Josie's stomach growl embarrassingly loud. "Supper's at 6, Mrs. Hollister said, pretending not to notice. "Your room is upstairs, second door on the right. Bathrooms at the end of the hall. You can have first use of the hot water since you're just off the stage." She eyed Josie's disheveled appearance. "Looks like you could use it, dear." Though the words weren't unkindly meant, Josie felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you, Mrs. Hollister. I would appreciate that very much." After showing Josie to a small but clean room furnished with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a plain wooden wardrobe, Mrs. Hollister left her to unpack. Josie sank onto the bed, exhaustion washing over her. But the promise of hot water was too tempting to ignore. Gathering her few toiletries and a clean if equally worn dress, she made her way to the bathroom. The hot bath was heaven after days of travel, and she scrubbed her hair and skin until both were pink and clean. With her hair wrapped in a towel, she dressed and returned to her room feeling more human than she had in weeks. By the time the dinner bell rang, Josie had unpacked her meager possessions and brushed her damp hair until it shone, braiding it into a simple coronet around her head. The dress she wore was faded blue calico, neat but visibly mended in several places. Still, she held her head high as she descended the stairs to meet her fellow boarders. There were 5 others besides herself and Mrs. Hollister. Mr. Peterson, the elderly station master, the Wilcox sisters, Harriet and Edith, who taught at the town school, Dr. Fredericks, a balding man with spectacles and a distracted air, and Miss Crane, a tight-lipped woman who worked as the telegraph operator. They regarded the newcomer with polite curiosity, asking the expected questions about her journey and her plans. "Josie will be working at Hargrove's Mercantile," Mrs. Hollister informed them as she passed a platter of roast chicken. "Oh dear," Miss Crane said with a pinched expression. "You'll be working with Eliza Blackwell then. She can be rather challenging." "Challenging is one word for it," Harriet Wilcox murmured. "Spiteful is another, ladies," Dr. Fredericks said mildly. "Let's not prejudice Miss Turner against her co-worker before she's even met her." "I'm sure I'll manage," Josie said diplomatically, though her heart sank. The last thing she needed was workplace difficulties when she was already struggling to establish herself. After dinner, exhaustion caught up with her, and Josie excused herself early. As she drifted to sleep in the unfamiliar bed, her last thoughts were of kind gray eyes and a deep voice that had made her feel, just for a moment, that she wasn't completely alone. Morning came too soon. Streaks of pink and gold across the eastern sky visible from her window. Josie dressed carefully in her best dress, a dark green that had once been quite stylish and still fit her well despite its age. She pinned her hair neatly and ate a quick breakfast before setting out for the Mercantile. Hargrove's general store occupied a prominent corner of Kelton's Main Street. It was larger than Josie had expected, with wide windows displaying everything from farm implements to fancy hats. The bell over the door jangled as she entered precisely at 7. "You must be the new girl," a portly man with side whiskers said from behind the counter. "I'm Walter Hargrove." "You're prompt, that's good." "Josephine Turner, sir. Thank you for the opportunity." "Well, references from Boston are hard to come by out here. Let's see if you live up to them." He gestured to a young woman arranging fabric bolts at the rear of the store. "Eliza will show you the ropes." "Been with me 3 years now." Josie approached the other woman, noting her impeccably styled blonde hair and fashionable dress. "Hello, I'm Josephine Turner." Mr. Hargrove said you would show me what to do. Eliza Blackwell turned, her pretty face freezing in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Of course. Her gaze swept over Josie's dress, lingering on the visible mending at the cuff. My goodness, what a quaint little frock. Is that what they're wearing in Boston these days? The mockery was thinly veiled, but Josie forced a smile. I'm afraid my traveling wardrobe is limited. Perhaps once I've earned a few wages, I can update it. Eliza's expression suggested she found this unlikely. Well, you'll be responsible for dusting the shelves, sweeping the floors, and helping customers find what they need. Can you manage inventory lists? Do sums? Yes, I can do both quite well, Josie replied, relieved to be on more solid ground. Her education had been thorough even if her circumstances had fallen. We'll see. Start with dusting those upper shelves. The ladder is in the storeroom. The morning passed in a flurry of tasks, with Eliza finding fault with nearly everything Josie did. By noon, when Mr. Hargrove announced he was stepping out for his dinner, Josie's spirits were flagging despite her determination to make a good impression. I'll mind the store, Eliza said sweetly. Josephine can continue with the inventory. As soon as the owner was gone, Eliza's demeanor changed completely. Listen carefully, she said, her voice cold. I don't know what you think you're doing here, but Kelton is my town. My father is on the town council, and my beau is the deputy marshal. I don't need some ragged charity case from back east taking up space and stealing attention. Josie blinked in surprise at the venom. I assure you, I'm just here to work and make my way. I have no interest in challenging your position. See that you remember it. Eliza's eyes narrowed. And do something about your appearance. Your hair looks positively greasy, and that dress belongs on a scarecrow. The bell over the door interrupted what was promising to be an even more unpleasant conversation. Both women turned to see Vincent Quincy striding in, his tall frame filling the doorway impressively. Ladies, he said pleasantly, tipping his hat. Miss Blackwell, Miss Turner, Mr. Quincy. Eliza's voice transformed into a honeyed purr. What can I help you with today? We just got those leather gloves you were asking about last time. Actually, I need some fabric, curtain material. His eyes found Josie's and he smiled. Thought the new place could use some civilizing touches. New place? Josie asked before she could stop herself. Just finished building a proper house out at the ranch. Lived in a cabin these past 5 years while I got the operation running. He moved toward the fabric display Josie had been organizing earlier. What would you recommend, Miss Turner? You being from Boston and all, I reckon you've got an eye for such things. Eliza's face tightened with displeasure as Josie stepped forward. Well, it depends on the room and the type of light it gets, she said, falling naturally into the role of saleswoman. East-facing windows, west. Main room faces west, gets the sunset full on. Bedrooms face north and south. Josie nodded thoughtfully, running her fingers over the bolts of fabric. For the west, perhaps this golden cotton, it would catch the light beautifully without fading too quickly. For bedrooms, something more restful, this blue linen, perhaps. Vince examined the fabrics she indicated, his expression serious. Reckon that would look right fine. I'll take 10 yards of each. Eliza inserted herself between them. I'll measure those for you, Mr. Quincy. Josephine, don't you have inventory to complete? Actually, Vince said easily. Since Miss Turner helped me choose, I'd prefer if she finished the sale. His smile never wavered, but there was steel beneath it. Eliza's lips pressed into a thin line, but she stepped aside. As you wish. As Josie measured and cut the fabric, Vince leaned against the counter conversationally. Settling in all right at Mrs. Hollister's? Yes, thank you. She's been very kind. Josie worked efficiently, glad to have something to focus on besides his intense gaze. Town treating you well otherwise? She hesitated, conscious of Eliza's eyes boring into her back. Everyone has been most welcoming. Something in her tone made his expression sharpen. "Glad to hear it," he said, though his eyes suggested he'd caught her hesitation. "Kelton's a good town, mostly good people." When she'd wrapped his purchases, he paid promptly, then paused as if considering something. "Miss Turner, I wonder if you might do me another favor. I'm hosting a small gathering this Saturday to celebrate the new house. Nothing fancy, just a few neighbors. Would you consider coming out to the ranch beforehand to help with those curtains? I'm afraid I'm all thumbs with a needle." Josie was acutely aware of Eliza's outraged silence behind her. That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose." "No imposition. I'll pay for your time, of course. And you'd be welcome to stay for the gathering afterward." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "Might be a good way to meet more folks in town." Put that way, it was hard to refuse. "Thank you, Mr. Quincy. I would be happy to help." "Excellent. I'll arrange transport with Mrs. Hollister. Say around 2 o'clock. After he left, the atmosphere in the store was glacial. Eliza didn't speak directly to Josie for the remainder of the day, but she made her displeasure known in countless small ways, reorganizing displays Josie had just completed, criticizing her handwriting on inventory sheets, and whispering with customers just loudly enough for phrases like "Boston charity case" and "utterly provincial" to be overheard. By closing time, Josie was mentally exhausted from maintaining her composure. As she walked back to the boarding house, she tried to focus on the positive aspects of her day rather than Eliza's petness. Mr. Hargrove seemed pleased with her work, at least, and the unexpected invitation from Vincent Quincy had been a bright spot. At dinner, when Josie mentioned her Saturday plans, Mrs. Hollister nodded approvingly. "The Quincy boy is a good sort. Built that ranch up from nearly nothing after his father died. Proper gentleman, too. Went to college back east before returning to take over the family land." "He seems kind," Josie agreed, trying to ignore the knowing looks exchanged by the Wilcox sisters. "Half the unmarried ladies in the county have set their caps for him," Edith Wilcox confided, "but he's been too busy with that ranch of his to pay much notice. Until now, perhaps." Her meaningful glance made Josie blush. "It's merely a business arrangement. He needs curtains hung and I can sew." "MMHMM," Harriet murmured, unconvinced. Just like he needed to buy 20 yards of fabric himself instead of sending one of his ranch hands. The rest of the week followed a similar pattern. Each day at the mercantile brought new subtle hostilities from Eliza, who seemed to have made it her mission to undermine Josie at every turn. Twice, Eliza accidentally knocked over displays Josie had just organized. Once, she spilled ink on a ledger Josie had nearly finished updating. And always, there were the whispered comments to customers, the meaningful looks, the small humiliations designed to make Josie feel as shabby and unwelcome as possible. By Friday evening, Josie was seriously questioning her decision to come to Kelton. Sitting alone on her bed, she examined her limited wardrobe with despair. Everything she owned showed signs of wear, and even her best dress, the green one she'd worn on her first day, was hopelessly outdated by current fashion standards. A soft knock at her door interrupted her dejection. "Josie, dear, may I come in?" Mrs. Hollister's voice called. "Of course," Josie replied, hastily wiping away a tear that had escaped despite her best efforts. The landlady entered carrying a large box. "This arrived for you this afternoon while you were at work. The delivery boy said it was urgent." Puzzled, Josie accepted the box. There was no sender marked on the outside. "How strange. I wasn't expecting anything." "Well, open it, child. I'm dying of curiosity." Josie carefully untied the string and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay a dress of deep blue silk. It was beautifully made but simple in design, fashionable without being ostentatious. Beneath it was a matching bonnet with a modest blue ribbon. "Oh my," Mrs. Hollister breathed. "That's lovely work. Someone has excellent taste." Josie lifted the dress with trembling hands. It was exactly her size. A small card fluttered to the floor, which Mrs. Hollister picked up and read aloud. "For tomorrow. No obligation, just a welcome to Kelton. VQ." "Vincent Quincy sent this," Josie whispered, shocked by the generosity. "But how did he know?" Mrs. Hollister smiled knowingly. "That boy doesn't miss much. I suspect he noticed more about your situation than you realize." She patted Josie's hand. "It's a kind gesture, not charity. There's a difference." Josie fingered the fine silk. She hadn't owned anything so beautiful since before her father's business failed. "It seems like too much." "Nonsense. The Quincy's have always been generous to newcomers. His mother was the same way, always looking out for folks who needed a hand up." Mrs. Hollister headed for the door. "Try it on. I want to see how it fits." Alone again, Josie slipped out of her worn dress and carefully put on the blue silk. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. The color brought out the blue in her hazel eyes, and the cut flattered her slender figure without being inappropriately tight. For the first time in over a year, Josie felt beautiful again. When she showed Mrs. Hollister, the older woman clapped her hands in delight. "Oh my, don't you look a picture? That Vince Quincy has a good eye, I'll say that for him." That night, Josie fell asleep with a lighter heart than she'd had in months. Perhaps Kelton held promise after all. Saturday dawned clear and warm. Josie spent the morning helping Mrs. Hollister with chores around the boarding house, then prepared for her trip to the Broken Q Ranch with nervous anticipation. She bathed carefully, dressed in the beautiful blue silk, and arranged her hair in a more elaborate style than her usual simple braid, pinning it up with her mother's pearl hairpins, one of the few valuable items she hadn't been forced to sell. Promptly at 2 o'clock, a wagon pulled up outside the boarding house. To her surprise, Vincent Quincy himself sat in the driver's seat rather than a ranch hand. "Miss Turner," he said, jumping down to help her into the wagon. "You look lovely today." "Thank you for the dress, Mr. Quincy," she said quietly. "It was incredibly generous." He shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "Seemed the least I could do, seeing as I'm the one who asked you to come to a gathering where folks might dress up a bit." He climbed back up beside her. "And please call me Vince. Mr. Quincy was my father." "Then you must call me Josie," she replied with a small smile. "All my friends did back home. Josie it is." He clicked to the horses and they started down the street. Several townspeople watched their departure with obvious interest, including Eliza Blackwell, who stood frozen outside the milliner's shop, her face a mask of outrage. The ride to the ranch took about 30 minutes, carrying them out of town and into rolling grasslands dotted with sagebrush. In the distance, mountains rose blue against the horizon. The Broken Q itself was impressive, several hundred acres of good grazing land with a creek running through it. A large barn, corral, bunkhouse, and several outbuildings surrounded a handsome 2-story house built of locally quarried stone and timber. "Did you really build this yourself?" Josie asked as they approached. "Had help with the heavy lifting," Vince admitted, "but drew up the plans myself." Always had a knack for building things. There was quiet pride in his voice. "Took most of last year, working between ranch duties." He showed her around the main floor, a spacious living area, dining room, kitchen, and study before leading her upstairs to the bedrooms. The house was well constructed and thoughtfully designed, with large windows to catch the breeze and built-in shelves and cupboards that spoke of careful craftsmanship. "It's wonderful," Josie said sincerely. "You've created something really special here." Vince looked pleased. "It's been a long time coming. Pa always meant to build a proper house, but there was never enough time or money while he was alive." He gestured to the windows. "Thought we could start with the curtains in the main room, catch that western light you mentioned." They worked together companionably for the next few hours. Josie measured and cut, while Vince mounted the curtain rods he'd crafted himself. As they worked, they talked about Boston and Vince's time at college there, about ranching in Utah Territory, about books they'd both read and places they'd seen. "How'd you end up in Kelton?" he asked as he held a curtain panel in place for her to judge the length. "Long way from Boston." Josie hesitated. She hadn't shared her full story with anyone yet. "My father was in banking," she said finally. "When the panic hit in '73, he lost everything. He died of heart failure 6 months later. My mother followed within the year." She concentrated on pinning the hem, avoiding his eyes. "There was just enough money to pay the creditors. I stayed with friends for a while, but charity wears thin," Vince finished quietly. She nodded. "I saw Mr. Hargrove's advertisement in a newspaper. He was looking for someone with experience in accounts and inventory, willing to relocate west. The salary wasn't much, but it included passage. Brave thing to do, coming all this way alone. Desperate, more like." She looked up at last. "I had nowhere else to go." His eyes held hers, gray and steady. "Sometimes the bravest things we do start with desperation." He cleared his throat and stepped back to examine their work. "Looks good, makes it feel like a real home." By the time they'd finished the downstairs windows, other guests were beginning to arrive. Vince introduced Josie to his foreman, Lucas Hayes, and his wife Martha, who had brought several dishes of food. Soon the house was filled with neighbors and ranch hands, all curious to see the completed house and meet the newcomer from Boston. To Josie's relief, everyone was welcoming. Martha Hayes took her under her wing, introducing her to others and making sure she always had someone to talk to. The evening was filled with good food, music from a fiddle played by one of the ranch hands, and stories that made Josie laugh until her sides ached. It was near midnight when the gathering began to break up. Vince found Josie on the porch where she'd stepped out for a breath of fresh air. "Having a good time?" he asked, joining her at the railing. "The best I've had in a very long time," she admitted. "Your friends are wonderful." "They can be your friends too if you'll let them." He turned to face her. "Kelton takes some getting used to, but it's a good community. Once folks know you, they stand by you." Josie thought of Eliza's hostility and sighed. Not everyone seems eager to welcome newcomers. Vince's expression darkened slightly. "You mean Eliza Blackwell? You know about that small town. Word gets around." He shook his head. "Don't let her bother you. She's always been that way, thinks her father's position makes her royalty around here." "She seems to think I'm some sort of threat," Josie said, confused. "I can't imagine why." Vince rubbed the back of his neck, looking suddenly uncomfortable. "Ah, well, might have something to do with me." "With you?" Josie blinked in surprise. "Her father's been pushing for a match between us for years. Good for business, he says. I've never encouraged it, but Eliza—" He shrugged. "She tends to see what she wants to see. And my arrival coincided with your attention," Josie realized. "No wonder she dislikes me so intensely." "Not your fault," Vince said firmly. "And not your problem. Eliza Blackwell doesn't own this town or the people in it." His eyes searched hers. "Don't let her drive you away. Kelton needs more folks like you, not fewer." Something in his gaze made her heart beat faster. "I don't plan to give up that easily," she assured him. "I've faced worse than petty cruelty." "Good." He smiled, then glanced at the darkened sky. "It's getting late. I should get you back to town before Mrs. Hollister sends out a search party." The ride back to Kelton was quiet but comfortable, the night air cool after the warmth of the crowded house. Josie found herself reluctant for the evening to end. "Thank you," she said as they pulled up outside the boarding house. "For everything, the dress, the invitation, all of it." "My pleasure." He helped her down from the wagon, his hands strong and steady at her waist. For a moment he seemed about to say something more, but then he simply tipped his hat. "Good night, Josie." "Good night, Vince." Sunday passed peacefully, with Josie attending church with the other boarders and spending the afternoon writing letters to friends back east. Monday, however, brought a return to the mercantile and Eliza's increasingly overt hostility. "Well, well," Eliza said when Josie arrived, her voice dripping with venom. "If it isn't the Boston beggar wearing stolen finery." Josie stiffened. "I don't know what you mean." "That dress," Eliza hissed, gesturing to the blue silk Josie had worn again. "Everyone knows Vincent Quincy bought it for you. What did you do to earn such generosity, I wonder? Something unladylike, no doubt." "Mr. Quincy was being neighborly," Josie replied, keeping her voice level with effort. "Something you might try yourself." Eliza's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Listen carefully, you little nobody. Vincent Quincy is spoken for. We've had an understanding for years. If you think batting your eyelashes and playing the poor orphan will win you a wealthy husband, you're sadly mistaken. I'm here to work, Miss Blackwell, not to find a husband." Josie moved to the counter and began arranging the day's receipts. "And I believe Mr. Quincy is capable of making his own decisions about whom he courts." The slap caught Josie by surprise, the sharp crack echoing in the empty store. Her cheek stung as she stared at Eliza in shock. "You uppity little tramp," Eliza seethed. "You think you can come here with your fancy Boston airs and take what's mine? I'll see you run out of town first." The bell over the door jangled and both women turned to see Mr. Hargrove enter. He looked between them with concern. "What's going on here? Miss Blackwell, did you strike Miss Turner?" "She insulted me," Eliza said quickly. "Made insinuations about my character." "That's not true," Josie protested, one hand still pressed to her reddened cheek. Mr. Hargrove frowned deeply. "This is unacceptable behavior in my establishment. Miss Blackwell, I've overlooked your attitude before, but I cannot condone violence. You're dismissed." Eliza's face went white. "What? You can't be serious. Your father doesn't run my store," Hargrove said firmly. "I've put up with your airs and your mistreatment of other employees for too long. Miss Turner has done nothing but work hard since she arrived. You've done nothing but create trouble. You'll regret this," Eliza spat, gathering her things. "My father will hear about this, and you'll never sell another item in this town." After she stormed out, Mr. Hargrove turned to Josie apologetically. "I'm sorry about that, Miss Turner. I should have addressed her behavior sooner. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Josie assured him, though her cheek still stung. "But I don't want to cause problems for your business." "Nonsense. Eliza Blackwell has been driving away customers for months with her attitude. Having you here has been a breath of fresh air." He patted her shoulder awkwardly. "Don't you worry about Councilman Blackwell. His influence isn't what his daughter thinks it is." News of the confrontation spread through Kelton with remarkable speed. By lunchtime, several townspeople had made special trips to the mercantile to make purchases and express their support for Josie. Mrs. Hollister brought a cold compress for her cheek and a reassuring hug. "That Blackwell girl has needed taking down a peg for years," the landlady declared. "About time someone stood up to her, even if you didn't mean to." Even the Wilcox sisters stopped by after school. Harriet bringing a slice of apple cake and Edith offering advice on which hazel tonic would reduce the redness fastest. The most surprising visitor came just before closing. Deputy Marshal Frank Reynolds entered the store, his badge gleaming on his chest. "Miss Turner," he said, removing his hat. "Heard there was some trouble this morning. Wanted to make sure you're all right." "I'm fine, thank you, Deputy," Josie replied, surprised. From Eliza's comments, she'd assumed the deputy was firmly in the Blackwell camp. Reynolds nodded, looking uncomfortable. "Miss Blackwell has been making some accusations. Wanted to hear your side." Josie told him exactly what had happened without embellishment. When she finished, the deputy sighed. "Matches what Mr. Hargrove said. Figured as much." He shook his head. "Between you and me, Miss Turner, Eliza's been spinning tales about us courting for months. Truth is, I took her to one social last Christmas as a favor to her father, and she's been impossible ever since. I'll set things straight with Councilman Blackwell." After he left, Mr. Hargrove chuckled. "Well, that should put a damper on Eliza's revenge plans. Frank Reynolds is the most honest man in the county. If he backs your version of events, no one will doubt it." The next few weeks passed more peacefully. Without Eliza's presence, work at the Mercantile became genuinely enjoyable. Mr. Hargrove gave Josie more responsibility, including ordering new stock and handling the accounts. Her natural talent for organization and figures impressed him, and he increased her wages accordingly. Vince Quincy became a regular visitor to the store, often finding reasons to come to town for supplies. Sometimes he stayed to chat. Other times he simply tipped his hat and asked how she was settling in. Each visit left Josie feeling a strange mixture of happiness and uncertainty. She enjoyed his company immensely, but was wary of reading too much into his attentions, especially given Eliza's claims. One afternoon in late May, a sudden thunderstorm caught Josie as she was walking home from work. She hurried along the boardwalk, but the rain came down in sheets, soaking her before she'd gone half a block. Ducking into the doorway of the bank to seek shelter, she nearly collided with Vincent Quincy. "Josie," he exclaimed, steadying her with his hands on her shoulders. "You're drenched." "I didn't expect the storm," she said, embarrassed by her bedraggled appearance. Her hair had come loose from its pins and hung in wet strands around her face. Water dripped from her sodden skirts, forming a puddle at her feet. Without hesitation, Vince shrugged out of his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Come on, I've got the wagon just around the corner. I'll take you home." They dashed through the downpour to where his wagon waited, covered with a canvas tarp. He helped her up and quickly joined her, pulling the tarp more securely over them both. "Thank you," Josie said, shivering slightly despite the coat. "This is becoming a habit, you rescuing me." "If you call offering a dry ride rescuing, your standards are mighty low," he teased, but his eyes were concerned as he noted her trembling. "You're chilled through." "I'll be fine once I get to Mrs. Hollister's." The rain hammered on the canvas above them, creating a strange sense of intimacy in their small, dry space. Vince looked at her intently, seeming to come to a decision. "Josie, there's something I've been wanting to talk to you about." He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. "I know you haven't been in Kelton long, and I don't want to rush you, but I find myself thinking about you more than is probably proper." Josie's heart skipped a beat. "Vince." "No, let me finish before I lose my nerve." He took a deep breath. "I admire you. Your courage in coming out here alone, the way you've handled everything including Eliza Blackwell's nastiness. I'd like to court you properly, if you're willing." Josie stared at him, raindrops still clinging to her eyelashes. "But Eliza says a lot of things, most of them untrue," Vince interrupted gently. There's never been anything between us except in her imagination." "You're sure?" Josie asked, needing certainty. Never been more sure of anything. His hand found hers, warm and strong. "What do you say? Will you let me call on you?" The answer seemed to rise from somewhere deep inside her, a place that had been waiting for this moment. "Yes, I'd like that very much." His smile was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. For a long moment, they sat in companionable silence, listening to the rain. Then he reluctantly released her hand and picked up the reins. "Better get you home before you catch your death," he said. "Mrs. Hollister will have my hide if I bring you back with pneumonia." News of their courtship spread quickly through Kelton. Most reactions were positive. Mrs. Hollister was downright gleeful, and the Wilcox sisters sighed romantically whenever Vince came to pick Josie up for an outing. Mr. Hargrove gruffly told Vince he'd better treat her right, but gave Josie Saturdays off so they could spend more time together. Not everyone was pleased, however. Councilman Blackwell made his disapproval known, refusing to shop at the Mercantile and encouraging his friends to do the same. Eliza herself had left town to stay with relatives in Salt Lake City, but her influence lingered in the whispers that sometimes followed Josie through town. "Gold digger," some said. "Set her cap for the richest bachelor in the county." "Homewrecker," others murmured. "Stole him right from under Eliza's nose." Vince was furious when he heard the gossip. "It's ridiculous. Everyone knows there was never anything between me and Eliza, and you're the least mercenary person I've ever met." "It doesn't matter what they say," Josie assured him, though the cruel words stung. "People who know us know the truth." Despite the whispers, the summer was the happiest of Josie's life. She and Vince rode across his land, picnicked by the creek, and attended socials and church gatherings together. He taught her to fish and shoot a rifle. She taught him to dance the complicated quadrilles fashionable in Boston. In the evenings, they often sat on Mrs. Hollister's porch swing, talking until the stars came out. By August, it was clear to everyone in Kelton that Vincent Quincy was deeply in love with Josephine Turner. The way he looked at her when she entered a room, the tenderness with which he touched her hand or helped her into a wagon, the pride in his voice when he introduced her to visiting cattle buyers all spoke of a man utterly captivated. For her part, Josie bloomed under his attention. The sadness that had shadowed her eyes since her arrival gradually faded, replaced by a quiet joy. She made friends throughout the town, joined the Ladies' Aid Society, and even began teaching reading to some of the ranch hands' children on Sunday afternoons. One evening in late August, Vince took her for a drive up to a bluff overlooking the town. The sunset painted the sky in spectacular shades of gold and pink, the perfect backdrop for a perfect moment. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing a small box. Josie's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a modest diamond. "It was my mother's," Vince explained, his voice husky with emotion. "Pa gave it to her when they decided to come west together. Said she was the bravest woman he'd ever known." He took her hand gently. "Reminded me of someone else I know." Tears welled in Josie's eyes. "Vince, Josephine Turner, would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" His gray eyes were earnest, filled with a love so pure it made her heart ache. "I can't promise it will always be easy, but I swear I'll spend every day trying to make you happy." "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking on the word. "Yes, I will marry you, Vincent Quincy." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into a kiss that seemed to contain all the promise of their future together. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling through tears. "We should head back," Vince said reluctantly. "Mrs. Hollister will be waiting up to hear the news." "I asked her permission this morning," Josie laughed. You asked my landlady for my hand. Well, with your parents gone, she's the closest thing to family you've got here." He looked suddenly uncertain. "Was that wrong?" "No," she said, squeezing his hand. "It was perfect. You're perfect." They returned to town to find Mrs. Hollister had indeed been waiting up along with half the boarding house residents. A small celebration ensued, with the landlady producing a bottle of blackberry wine she'd been saving for a special occasion, and Dr. Fredericks proposing a toast to the happy couple. The following Sunday, their engagement was announced in church, met with applause and congratulations from most of the congregation. Only Councilman Blackwell and his immediate circle remained stony-faced. Plans for an October wedding were quickly set in motion. Martha Hayes offered to help with the dress, and the ladies of the church promised to handle decorations and food. Vince's ranch hands began work on an addition to the house, a bright, spacious room that would serve as Josie's personal sitting room and library. 2 weeks before the wedding, Josie was working alone in the mercantile when the bell over the door jangled. She looked up with a smile that quickly faded when she saw Eliza Blackwell standing there, elegantly dressed in the latest fashion from Salt Lake City. "Miss Blackwell," Josie said cautiously, "how may I help you?" "You can't," Eliza replied coldly. "But I thought I should give you the chance to help yourself." "I don't understand." Eliza removed her gloves deliberately. "I've come to offer you $500 to leave Kelton, tonight, without a word to anyone, especially Vincent Quincy." Josie stared at her in disbelief. "That's absurd." "Is it? $500 is a small fortune for someone in your position. You could go to San Francisco, Denver, anywhere you like. Start fresh with enough money to establish yourself properly." Eliza's smile was shark-like. "Better than being trapped in a backwater town with a man who's only marrying you out of pity." "That's not true," Josie said firmly, though the words sent a chill through her. "Vince loves me." "Does he? Or did he simply feel sorry for the bedraggled creature who arrived with nothing but a carpetbag and sad eyes?" Eliza moved closer, her voice dropping to a confidential tone. "Everyone knows he has a soft spot for strays. Look how he took you and bought you clothes, paraded you around town, made you respectable." "You don't know anything about our relationship," Josie replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I know Vincent Quincy, known him all my life." Eliza examined her perfectly manicured nails. "He's a kind man, too kind sometimes. Doesn't have the heart to turn away someone truly in need." Her gaze flicked dismissively over Josie. "Like a half-starved kitten in the rain. But kittens grow up, and men like Vince need wives who bring something to the marriage besides gratitude." Despite herself, doubt began to creep into Josie's mind. Had Vince only felt sorry for her? Was his kindness merely pity rather than love? "Think about it," Eliza continued, pressing her advantage. "What do you bring to this match? No family connections, no dowry, no particular accomplishments. Just the clothes on your back, clothes he bought you, no less." "That's enough," a deep voice interrupted from the doorway. Both women turned to see Vince standing there, his expression thunderous. "Eliza, I think you should leave. Now." Eliza's composure slipped momentarily before she recovered with a brittle smile. "Vincent, I was just having a friendly chat with your fiancé." "I heard what you were doing," he said coldly, "and there was nothing friendly about it. I was only pointing out some hard truths, the only truth that matters," Vince cut her off, moving to stand beside Josie. "Is that I love this woman more than life itself. Not out of pity, not out of charity, but because she is the strongest, kindest, most genuine person I've ever known." He turned to Josie, taking her hands in his. "When you stepped off that stagecoach, you looked tired and travel-worn, yes, but never pitiful, never beaten. I saw a woman who'd faced terrible losses but refused to surrender to them, who crossed a continent alone rather than accept a life of dependence. Tears welled in Josie's eyes as he continued. What you bring to our marriage can't be measured in dollars or family connections. You bring courage, intelligence, and a heart so generous it amazes me daily. His thumbs brushed over her knuckles gently. So don't listen to Eliza's poison, not for 1 second. Eliza's face contorted with rage. You're making a terrible mistake, Vincent. She'll never be accepted here, never be anything but that ragged beggar who came west to hunt for a husband. That's where you're wrong, a new voice said. Martha Hayes stood in the doorway, several other town ladies behind her. Josie Turner has been more accepted in 6 months than you've been in your entire life, Eliza Blackwell. We've all seen how hard she works, added Harriet Wilcox. How kind she is to everyone, regardless of their station. And how she never says an unkind word about anyone, Mrs. Hollister put in pointedly. Even those who deserve it. Surrounded by unexpected support, Josie felt the last of her doubts fade away. She squeezed Vince's hands, drawing strength from his unwavering gaze. I appreciate your offer, Miss Blackwell, she said calmly, but I must decline. My place is here, with the man I love and the community that has become my home. Eliza looked around at the united front facing her and realized she had lost. Without another word, she swept out of the store, her expensive skirts rustling angrily. In the silence that followed, Martha Hayes was the first to speak. Well, that was more excitement than Kelton usually sees on a Tuesday. Everyone laughed, the tension broken. As the ladies dispersed, chattering about Eliza's audacity, Vince pulled Josie into a private corner of the store. Are you all right? He asked, searching her face. I am now. She offered him a shaky smile. For a moment, she almost had me believing. Don't, he said firmly. Don't ever doubt what you mean to me. His hand came up to cup her cheek gently. From that first day, it was never about your circumstances, Josie. It was about who you are, who you've always been, beneath the traveled dirt and tired eyes. The memory of their first meeting suddenly clarified in Josie's mind. That day on the stagecoach, you saw past everything else, didn't you? He nodded, a soft smile playing at his lips. You looked exhausted and your dress had seen better days, but there was something about the way you held yourself. Dignity, strength. His thumb caressed her cheekbone. I remember thinking you were like uncut diamond, a little rough from the journey, but with a fire inside that nothing could extinguish. Josie leaned into his touch, her heart full. I love you, Vincent Quincy. And I love you, Josephine Turner, soon to be Quincy. He bent to kiss her softly. 14 more days. Not a moment too soon, she whispered against his lips. The days leading up to the wedding passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Martha Hayes and the church ladies transformed the small Kelton church with autumn flowers and ribbons. The dress they created for Josie was simple but elegant, made from ivory satin ordered specially from Salt Lake City. On her wedding morning, Josie woke early, watching the sunrise from her window at the boarding house. Today was the beginning of her new life, a life she could never have imagined when she first arrived in this dusty frontier town. A soft knock at her door heralded Mrs. Hollister, who entered with a breakfast tray and misty eyes. Thought you might want to eat something before the chaos begins, the landlady said, setting down the tray. Can't have you fainting at the altar. Thank you, Josie said, touched by the thoughtfulness. For everything, Mrs. Hollister, you've been so kind to me. Pish-posh. The older woman waved away the gratitude, but her eyes were suspiciously bright. You're a good girl, Josie. Deserve every happiness. She bustled around the room, opening curtains wider and straightening already neat items. Now eat up. The Wilcox sisters will be here at 9 to help with your hair and dressing." The morning passed in a flurry of activity. By noon, Josie stood before the mirror in her wedding dress, hardly recognizing the elegant woman who looked back at her. Her hair was arranged in loose curls, adorned with tiny white flowers. The ivory satin dress fit perfectly, enhancing her slender figure without being ostentatious. "You look beautiful," Harriet Wilcox said, adjusting the small veil. "Vincent Quincy is going to swallow his tongue when he sees you." "Something borrowed," Mrs. Hollister said, fastening a delicate pearl necklace around Josie's throat. "These were my mother's. Brought them all the way from Virginia 50 years ago." "Something blue," Edith added, handing her a blue silk handkerchief embroidered with her new initials, JQ. "Something old," Martha Hayes said, presenting a lace-edged handkerchief. "This was in Vince's mother's wedding trunk. He wanted you to have it." Tears threatened to spill over, but Josie blinked them back. "Thank you all so much. I never expected when I came here." "No crying now, Mrs. Hollister warned. "You'll ruin your complexion. Save the tears for when you see your groom." A knock at the door announced the arrival of Deputy Marshal Reynolds, who had offered to escort Josie to the church in the absence of her father. "Ladies," he said, removing his hat as he entered. "The church is full, and I've got a very nervous groom asking if his bride has changed her mind." "As if I would," Josie laughed, gathering her small bouquet of autumn wildflowers. "I'm ready." The short walk to the church seemed to take both an eternity and no time at all. Before she knew it, Josie stood at the entrance, the doors opening to reveal a church filled with the people of Kelton, her people now. At the altar waited Vincent Quincy, so handsome in his new suit that her heart nearly stopped. As she walked down the aisle on Deputy Reynolds' arm, Josie was overwhelmed by the journey that had brought her here. From the depths of loss in Boston to this moment of perfect joy in a frontier town she'd never heard of a year ago. When she reached Vince, he took her hands in his eyes shining with a love so pure it took her breath away. "You are so beautiful," he whispered, loud enough for only her to hear. The ceremony was simple but deeply moving. They exchanged vows in clear, steady voices, promising to love and cherish each other through all of life's challenges. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Vince's kiss was tender and reverent, a promise of all the days to come. The celebration afterwards spilled out from the church and into the town square, where tables had been set up for a community feast. There was music and dancing, speeches and toasts, laughter and a few happy tears. Even Councilman Blackwell made an appearance, grudgingly offering congratulations and a gift, a sign, perhaps, that healing was possible. As the afternoon light began to fade, Vince led Josie to the waiting wagon that would take them to their home now. The vehicle had been decorated with ribbons and flowers, with a hand-lettered sign proclaiming "Just Married" attached to the back. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Quincy?" Vince asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way that never failed to make her heart skip. "More than ready, Mr. Quincy," she replied, smiling up at him. They rode through town amid cheers and well wishes, heading for the Broken Q Ranch as husband and wife. The house looked different somehow as they approached, warmer, more welcoming, as if it too had been waiting for this day. Vince stopped the wagon in front of the house but made no move to get down. Instead, he turned to Josie, his expression suddenly serious. "Before we go in," he said, taking her hands in his, "I want to say something." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "When I was a boy, my father told me that true wealth isn't measured in acres or cattle or gold. It's measured in the love you give and receive." His fingers traced the wedding band he'd placed on her finger hours before. "By that measure, I became the richest man in the territory the day you agreed to be my wife." Tears filled Josie's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "And I," she said softly, "who came to Kelton with nothing but a carpet-bag and fading hope, leave this day with more riches than I ever dreamed possible." Vince's smile was tender as he leaned in to kiss her. Then, to her surprise, he jumped down from the wagon and came around to her side. Before she could move, he scooped her up in his arms. "Vincent," she gasped, laughing. "What are you doing, carrying my bride across the threshold?" he declared, striding toward the house with her cradled against his chest. "It's tradition." "You'll hurt your back," she protested weakly, even as she wrapped her arms around his neck. "Worth it," he replied, climbing the porch steps effortlessly. At the door, he paused. "Welcome home, Josephine Quincy." As he carried her inside to begin their new life together, Josie knew with absolute certainty that she had found her place in the world, not in the bustling city of her birth, but here in this frontier town, with this man who had seen beyond her circumstances to the woman within. Years later, when their children asked how they met, Vince would always tell the same story. "Your mother stepped off a stagecoach looking like she'd traveled through 7 kinds of hell," he'd say, his eyes twinkling. "Hair all wild, dress all dusty, most beautiful sight I'd ever seen." And Josie would smile, remembering that first day and all the days since, the joys and sorrows they'd weathered together, the family they'd built, the love that had only deepened with time. From the depths of loss had come the greatest happiness of her life, proving once again that sometimes the end of one journey is simply the beginning of another, far more wonderful one. On their 10th anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their home watching their 3 children play in the yard, Vince presented Josie with a small wooden box he'd carved himself. Inside lay a silver hairbrush with her initials engraved on the back. "What's this for?" she asked, touched by the unexpected gift. Vince's smile was soft as he reached out to tuck a strand of her chestnut hair behind her ear, the same tender gesture he'd made countless times over the years. "To remind you of something I've known since the day we met," he said. "No matter what the world sees travel dirt or fancy silk to me, you've always shone brighter than any star in the Utah sky." And as he leaned in to kiss her, Josie knew that some journeys, once begun, never truly end. They simply transform into something more beautiful than we ever dared to dream.